The grand hall of the celestial assembly stretched above them like a cathedral carved from starlight, spires of refractive crystal, whispering constellations etched into every panel, and beneath it all, a single, painfully empty seat. It sat at the far end of the Chamber of Worlds, untouched for 300 cycles, cloaked in silence, framed in dread. Until today. You're telling me? Ambassador Kustek hissed, chittering mandibles clicking in what passed for outraged disbelief among the Carthari, that humanity's chair, that chair, has remained empty for 3 centuries because you all just assumed they were dead. Ambassador Kayla Lynn smoothed her blazer with the serenity of someone entirely unfazed by the shrieking insectoid fury erupting beside her. She didn't look up at the chair. She didn't have to. The whole room, 2,000 diplomats from across the known spiral, was already staring at it. That would be correct, yes, she said mildly. But the quarantine beacons, Kustek sputtered, the interstellar warning buoys, the documentation, the plague reports. Kayla finally looked up. Her smile was the kind that made seasoned diplomats instinctively check for hidden weapons. Ah, those, she said. Funny story. The room held its breath. You could feel the silence settle, thick as nebula mist. Even the light dimmed slightly, as if the universe itself leaned in. You see, she said, tone light, we just discovered your surveillance satellites. Quite impressive cloaking, really. Nearly missed them. But once we knew we weren't alone in the universe, well, the entire planet collectively panicked. So we improvised. Her fingers tapped her data pad casually, pulling up an old hologram. It showed a still-rotating red quarantine beacon, broadcasting an audiovisual warning in 36 known languages. She turned it off with a smile. We hacked your satellites, fed them a neat little tale about a species-ending plague, then set up automated warnings. The whole thing took about 6 months of unprecedented global cooperation, which, honestly, was the most difficult part. A wave of vocal chaos swept through the chamber like a tidal shockwave. Crystalline diplomats flashed warning colors. Gaseous collectives rearranged their containment fields in agitation. A floating cephalopod, known only as Counselor, SLRN, briefly stopped undulating in disbelief. You faked your extinction? Someone gasped. Oh yes, Kayla nodded. Quite thoroughly. You'd be surprised how easy it is to disappear when everyone's terrified of catching a virus that doesn't exist. The Vayari representative stood, resplendent in their prism glass robes. Are you now claiming that Earth's disappearance, Terrasol as you call it, was an intentional deception? Correct again. Kayla beamed. Think of it as preemptive quarantine. High Counselor's wrath loomed above, his tentacles curling like ink in deep gravity. You're telling this assembly that your species detected covert galactic surveillance, responded by fabricating an extinction event, and then maintained that ruse for 300 cycles. Kayla's smile sharpened. Yes, though in fairness, we weren't sure it would work for more than 6 months. And yet it did. Oh, absolutely. Turns out no one was brave enough to double-check. Silence returned. Deeper now. The kind of silence that leaves a ringing in your ears. In that time, she continued, we've been studying you, all of you, your technologies, your politics, your charming interstellar bureaucracy. Zratha's voice dropped several octaves. Why reveal yourselves now? Kayla took a breath. Because we're no longer afraid of you, she said simply, and frankly keeping a global deception running for 3 centuries is exhausting. You ever try to keep teenagers from posting photos on the galactic net? We had to invent a whole agency. It's called the Digital Containment Directorate. We pay them in memes and anxiety suppressants. There were murmurs now, shuffles, delegates tapping their personal data slates. Kayla could already see 3 of them looking up Council Charter Section 7, Subsection 12. We're also, she added casually, applying for full membership. Several beings fainted outright. You can't, hissed Kustek. You've been absent. But not removed, Kayla said sweetly. According to the charter, any species with an occupied seat for more than 100 cycles gains automatic status. Earth's seat has never been officially vacated. It's just been uninhabited. Technically, Zratha's tentacles had now turned a shade of mauve that, in his species, indicated either contemplative fury or mild indigestion. That is a creative interpretation. Our legal team is very proud, Kayla replied. They had a lot of time to study council law. Decades, actually. More murmurs. Delegates arguing in hushed tones. Data screens flickering. A handful of Veari were already projecting simulated legal simulations. And if we reject your application, Kayla's voice stayed calm, even bright. Then we go home. Release all those declassified monitoring reports. Activate the social media fail-safes. And let the galaxy know how many unauthorized attempts were made to probe our plague zone. Some of them even had funding. I'm sure your oversight committees will love the transparency. The silence that followed had weight. A moment later, the Veari delegate rose again. According to Article 7, they said, Terrasol's claim is valid. Kayla Lynn beamed. Wonderful. We've prepared a gift basket, also some documentation, and cookies. And with that, she walked slowly, triumphantly, toward Earth's seat, long empty, long silent, long feared, and sat down. Behind her, the council dissolved into a frenzy of whispering translators, emergency comms, and bureaucratic seizures. Kayla adjusted her collar, flicked open her datapad, began reading through 3 centuries of council meeting notes with a serene little smile. Phase 1 was complete. Now it was time for humanity to truly introduce themselves to the galaxy. And chaos, delightful, organized chaos, was coming. 3 standard cycles after Ambassador Kayla Lynn casually unsealed 3 centuries of deception by reclaiming Earth's council seat, the Celestial Assembly was still very much not okay. In fact, the term existential crisis in progress would have been an optimistic understatement. Not that Kayla was concerned. She had bigger problems, like explaining to the celery delegation why humans voluntarily pay money to be locked in simulated prison scenarios filled with puzzles, traps, and often plastic skeletons. They're called escape rooms, Kayla said patiently, gesturing at the large holo-display behind her. They're fun. The celery's iridescent hide flickered with confused purples. You simulate incarceration for entertainment. Voluntary incarceration. There's a difference. And you intentionally make these scenarios difficult to escape. Oh, absolutely, Kayla said brightly. Time challenges. Hidden keys. Elaborate riddles. Sometimes lasers. It's very popular with birthday parties and corporate team-building retreats. From the upper tiers, Ambassador Drow9 of the Arctic Coalition's mandibles clicked furiously. This is illogical. What possible purpose could such simulations serve? Problem-solving, creative thinking, a bit of adrenaline, and, Kayla added with a wink, a sense of accomplishment when you realize you've outsmarted the mad scientist who designed the puzzle. The Arctic ambassador twitched. Why would anyone want to simulate a crisis? Kayla raised a brow. Have you met humanity? The chamber rippled with nervous laughter. Kayla waited. Right on cue, the High Counselor's projection flickered into view, his tendrils a respectable shade of weary blue. Ambassador Lynn, the High Counselor intoned, your species' recreational habits are concerning. Kayla gave him her most winning diplomatic smile. Which brings me to today's actual proposal. Oh no, someone muttered. She tapped her pad. The holo-display shifted from a 3D rendering of a locked room scenario to an annotated diagram of the Terrasol quarantine perimeter. We would like to formally propose the creation of the Celestial Assembly Security Challenge program. Think of it as a galaxy-wide escape room. There was silence, then an explosion of protests, gasps, and more than one translator device giving up and rebooting itself. You want the galaxy's member species to compete to breach planetary defenses, asked the bewildered Vernari delegate. Exactly, Kayla said cheerfully. Under controlled conditions, of course. One species defends. Others try to break in. Everyone learns something. We're calling it ethical hacking diplomacy. You're gamifying security breaches, the Veari ambassador hissed. Gamifying shared improvement, Kayla corrected. Besides, Earth will go first. We're opening the Terrasol quarantine zone to all registered competitors. If anyone successfully penetrates the system, they get a rotating seat on the new Security Oversight Committee. With us. Someone fainted in the upper levels. Your quarantine system, said the celery delegate, slowly, that has held firm for 300 cycles. Kayla smiled modestly. We like to think of it as battle-tested. A low hum spread through the hall as delegates accessed their own intelligence archives. Kayla could see the moment some of them discovered their own species covert probes had been detected, tagged, and logged. And just think, she added, swiping again, successful breach attempts come with perks. Consulting rights, custom encryption tech, meme trading privileges. That last bit caught attention. Across the chamber, data feeds shifted from security chatter to meme markets. New graphs appeared. Trade indexes. Meme value spikes. The High Counselor's voice cracked through the rising excitement. Ambassador Lin, are you telling me you've monetized both your defense infrastructure and your cultural chaos? Kayla nodded. We call it creative containment economics. Very trendy. We should not be encouraging galactic intrusion competitions, someone shouted. Better they try with permission than in secret, Kayla countered. We all get stronger. And let's be honest, most of you already tried to break in. Now you can try again, with trophies. A soft chime echoed through the chamber. Several delegates looked up. The Silicon Collective had just transmitted their application. They wanted to attempt the Terrasol breach, and they'd submitted an official logo. Oh dear, Kayla said, pulling it up. They've already branded their team. I believe that's a glittering crab holding a lockpick. Chaos, as usual, followed, as the council dissolved into debate, data analysis, and a spirited discussion on whether a lockpick-wielding crab violated committee logo standards. Kayla returned to her seat and sipped her tea. Phase 2 was off to a smashing start, and she hadn't even told them about the zombies yet. By the next cycle, the Celestial Assembly was no longer confused. It was fully, deeply, gloriously compromised by fun. Ambassador Kayla Lin stood at the center of the assembly chamber, surrounded by nervous whispers, diplomatic disbelief, and more datapad tapping than any budget session in recorded history. Around her, the hollow viewport flickered with live feeds from Earth's now legendary quarantine challenge zone, where multiple alien delegations were attempting to ethically breach Terrasol's defenses. It had started as a proposal. Now it was an event. Counselor Urith of the Veari leaned forward, tone clipped. Ambassador Lin, you are aware that half the galaxy is now live streaming infiltration attempts on your planetary perimeter? Kayla didn't even flinch. Yes, we've partnered with several entertainment collectives to provide commentary, analysis, and themed merchandise. One of the infiltration teams just released a limited edition plush of their breach drone. It squeaks. The murmuring returned with renewed intensity. On the central holoscreen, a sleek crystalline ship drifted into Earth's upper orbit, its approach graceful until a swarm of decoy satellites activated around it. They weren't armed. They weren't even real. They were just extremely lifelike holograms of squirrels. glowing, red-eyed squirrels. The ship hesitated, then reversed. Kayla turned, folding her hands behind her back with polite satisfaction. We've observed a 64% decrease in unauthorized recon attempts since launching the public breach simulation. Turns out most species prefer failure with prizes over failure with shame. A delegation of hooded beings from the Praxery Alliance whispered among themselves. One turned toward Kayla. Are the holograms always mammalian? Only on weekdays, Kayla replied. The High Counselor's projection shimmered into place, his tendrils unreadable. Ambassador Lin, your people have turned planetary security into a game show. We prefer to call it interactive resilience training, she said sweetly. And the rules? Oh, they're evolving in real time, she replied, just like any adversary would, which is the point. And before you ask, yes, the holographic squirrels will be replaced next cycle with ducks. From the upper balconies, startled chimes and stifled snorts. Kayla continued. We also observed a Praxian shapeshifter infiltrate our training center yesterday. Impressive disguise. Unfortunately, our AI mistook them for a suspiciously symmetrical janitor and flagged them for aesthetic inconsistency. A crystalline delegate shivered. You train your security systems to spot symmetry? We train them to spot human suspicion, Kayla clarified, which, culturally speaking, has a flair for absurd precision. The room rippled with discomfort, or awe. It was always hard to tell with the assembly. Kayla turned back to the growing screen feed behind her, now displaying two alien crafts tentatively moving through what appeared to be an asteroid field. It wasn't. It was a cloud of glittering particles suspended by magnetic pulses, an illusion generator nicknamed the Disco Nebula. We find that making intrusions more theatrical also makes them easier to analyze, Kayla said, as though discussing crop reports. Every move leaves a performance signature. It's beautiful, really. But why the theatrics? Asked one stunned delegate. Kayla turned, her expression suddenly calm. Because for 300 cycles, we fooled a galaxy into thinking we were extinct. Now we want to teach the galaxy how we did it. A silence fell, sharp and immediate. No more secrets, she continued. Just lessons. If you're going to try to break each other's systems, let it be done with open eyes. Let it be entertaining. Let it be educational. And, if you must, let it involve squirrels. Even the High Counselor paused. And what of the reward? Someone finally asked. Kayla smiled. That same unsettling diplomatic weapon she always deployed right before unleashing cultural bedlam. The reward, she said, is knowing your systems are stronger. And the top team gets naming rights to the next simulation variant. She paused, then added with theatrical flair. Currently in development, cursed library maze with ghost cat protocols. The chamber erupted. A few laughed outright. A few screamed into translation buffers. At least one delegation, the silicon-bonded, seemed to already be designing breaching tools shaped like ancient Terrasol library cards. Kayla sat, calm, unbothered, slightly radiant, and Phase 3, she noted privately, was already beginning to unfold. Because soon the memes would arrive. Ambassador Kayla Lin had explained many strange Terrasol traditions to the Celestial Assembly, but this one might break them. The humans, whispered Counselor Yirith, staring in horrified fascination at the projection before them, voluntarily place themselves in simulated hostile environments, then race each other to solve puzzles in order to escape. Correct, Kayla said pleasantly. They're called escape rooms. Very good for birthdays and corporate morale. And they pay to be locked inside. Enthusiastically, the chamber was dead silent until the Ardhari ambassador's translator unit audibly glitched during an attempt to interpret Team Sherlock versus the haunted train station. Kayla didn't flinch. She tapped the holoscreen again. New images flickered to life. Humans in matching t-shirts and silly hats, racing against timers, assembling clues, shouting about ciphers and keypads, and hidden UV messages scrawled on plastic skeletons. Then she pulled up another holo. And this, she said almost casually, is competitive cheese rolling. The council exploded, sputtering, clicking, harmonized howling. A crystalline entity stood so abruptly their ceremonial sash fell off. One gelatinous delegate reconstituted out of sheer offense. Kayla folded her arms behind her back and allowed the madness to swirl. The footage, still playing behind her, depicted a steep hill, an oversized wheel of dairy-based weaponry, and dozens of humans willingly launching themselves into what could only be described as enthusiastic gravitational surrender. Why? Counselor's Wrath managed to ask, why would anyone do that? Kayla smiled. Because they're alive. Because it's absurd. Because the reward is cheese. Isn't that beautiful? Ambassador, the High Counselor interjected with a voice like strained metal. I hope you are not implying that these activities have any bearing on galactic matters. Oh, I'm not implying it, she said brightly. I'm stating it outright. She walked slowly into the center of the chamber, her tone sharpening with purpose. Terrasol has used simulation, chaos, and absurdity to train its population for the unpredictable. Escape rooms, hone pattern recognition, stress response, creative collaboration. Cheese rolling teaches bone density and commitment. More murmurs. And the rest of our pointless activities? Skydiving, bungee jumping, salsa dancing on rooftops during rainstorms. They're not distractions. They're rehearsals. Rehearsals for what? The Art Hari delegate hissed. For surviving the impossible. Kayla let that sit, then continued. For 3 centuries, while we played dead, we also prepared. We learned that in the void of control, creativity is our strongest shield. And now, as species begin testing each other's defenses, diplomatic boundaries, and emotional bandwidths, she turned and tapped the screen one last time. A still image of a group of interspecies children, human, Art Hari, celery, even one glowing void-born, working together inside a themed puzzle simulation labeled the Galactic Escape Challenge, Friendship Protocols. They're learning to, Kayla said softly. They think it's a game. It's not. It's the future. Silence. But not disbelief. It was the kind of silence that carried the weight of recognition. From the upper tiers, one of the Vayari delegates, known for rigid adherence to protocol, stood. My people wish to sponsor an escape module. We will call it the Labyrinth of Bureaucratic Despair. Kayla smiled. I'll send you a form in triplicate. And with that, she returned to her seat, leaving a chamber full of stunned diplomats, cultural liaisons, and one quietly weeping gelatinous official reconsidering everything they thought they knew about recreational architecture. It started, as most Terrasol calamities do, with a cat. Specifically, a low-resolution image of a cat perched smugly in a cardboard box. Its paws crossed like it knew all the secrets of the universe and wasn't sharing. Above it, a caption in half-broken galactic standard read, I fits, so I sits. Political strategy, unlocked. Ambassador Kayla Lynn didn't post it herself. She didn't have to. The Cultural Dispersal Office of Earth, CDOE, had authorized the strategic release of culturally humorous visual data, memes, to the galactic web through tightly moderated channels. Officially, it was an effort to foster interspecies empathy. Unofficially, it was an act of cultural warfare. Within 3 solar rotations, the meme had spread to 74 planetary networks. By the 7th, it had been retranslated, recontextualized, and adopted into the diplomatic doctrine of 3 minor polities, one of which declared the cat an honorary trade ambassador. And that was before the Valari Collective discovered reaction GIFs. The Celestial Assembly convened in emergency session, its primary concern no longer planetary security breaches or diplomatic subterfuge, but the meme cascade. "We're being inundated," hissed the crystalline envoy of the Sixtari, his form flickering with interference as his translator tried and failed to interpret Icana's governance. "The data traffic has tripled," said the Veari rep, eyes twitching. "Entire systems are bogged down in captioned images of animals and passive-aggressive cultural observations. We're calling it the meme economy." Kayla offered helpfully from her seat, spinning a holographic display of galactic meme exchange rates. "Turns out authentic Terrasol memes are now considered cultural commodities." The room groaned in unison. "You're telling us," the High Counselor said slowly, tentacles radiating resignation, "that humanity's digital humor is now a tradable asset." "Oh yes," Kayla said brightly. "Very exclusive, very lucrative. The rarer the meme, the higher its cultural resonance value, particularly early internet formats, what you might call vintage sarcasm." A Praxery delegate raised a trembling limb. "Our universities are now offering meme studies degrees. Our youth have stopped quoting prophecy texts and started quoting Doge." "Such wisdom," Kayla murmured reverently. The Arthari ambassador slammed a claw into the podium. "This is a security breach." "No," Kayla said, her voice honeyed steel. "This is influence. You're no longer afraid of us. You're laughing with us." She rose and stepped forward. For centuries, the galaxy viewed Earth as a terrifying enigma, a species clever enough to disappear itself and unpredictable enough to weaponize absurdity. Now you're discovering what we really are: deeply weird, chronically online, and disturbingly relatable. She tapped her console. The screen shifted to a holographic meme board, dozens of images floating midair. Cats, frogs, dramatic chipmunks, rewritten council laws annotated with animated eyebrows. In the bottom corner, a live auction of a certified rare Pepe of pre-fusion era surpassed the diplomatic budget of a minor star empire. "And while you were laughing," Kayla continued, "your species stopped monitoring our defense systems. They stopped preparing for retaliation. They started tagging us in joke threads." The High Counselor's tendrils turned a color that was either horror or existential crisis. "This," Kayla said, "was never just humor. It's cultural compression, a way to disarm hostility, to encode politics, perspective, personality in 7 words and a JPEG." A pause. "And now that the galaxy's trading in them, we'd like to propose a regulatory body, the Galactic Meme Commission. Earth will provide oversight for authenticity and quality assurance." The Veari groaned. The Arthari demanded a vote. The Celery whispered excitedly about their meme portfolio returns. Kayla sat back down, calm as a comet in stable orbit. Outside the council chamber, billions of beings across hundreds of worlds laughed, traded, reacted, and slowly understood. They weren't afraid of Earth anymore. They were subscribing. The assembly chamber smelled like lavender. No one knew how that was possible. The air filtration systems were supposed to be sterile. But somehow, ever since the Terrasol Botanical Initiative launched, a faint trace of Earth flora lingered in the upper tiers like pollen in policy. Ambassador Kayla Lynn was behind it, of course. She stood before the council once more, this time not accompanied by security protocols, dancing cats, or digital sarcasm, though those still trended galaxy-wide. No, today, Kayla stood beside a modest wooden planter. Inside it, a succulent. It was, objectively, adorable. "Ambassador Lynn," the High Counselor began wearily, "you have been summoned here to explain why interstellar trade channels are being flooded with requests for Earth plants." Kayla gestured to the succulent. "Because it's working." The chamber collectively blinked. Kayla elaborated. "We've observed a measurable increase in diplomatic cooperation among delegations engaged in plant care." The celery have entire hydroponic decks dedicated to earth herbs. The Praxery now holds something called Thorn Talk Thursdays. And the Silicon Collective, well, they've started growing microcrystals that mimic chlorophyll just so they can feel included. A pause. They're calling it photosynthesis cosplay. Someone in the balconies snorted. A crystalline entity coughed in confusion. The point, Kayla continued, stepping beside the planter, is that gardening promotes patience, responsibility, and empathy, traits which, I feel compelled to point out, are historically inversely correlated with the impulse to start wars. The Arthari ambassador narrowed their eyes. Are you implying that you've introduced horticulture to prevent conflict? Kayla's smile could have powered a small moon. I'm saying we've given the galaxy a better hobby than weapons development. She tapped her console. The hologram flared to life, showing footage from across known space, alien embassies adorned with moss walls, root systems integrated into diplomatic architecture, planetary defense command centers turned into hybrid greenhouses. Some of our allies have gone enthusiastically feral, Kalo admitted. The Vayari ambassador once threatened to duel over a Monstera mutation. The image behind her shifted to a panicked delegation arguing over a variegated leaf pattern. A small note at the bottom read, "Incident resolved peacefully with tea and cuttings exchange." Peaceful disputes, Kayla said brightly. Through foliage, Counselor Urith sighed. And the reports of black market plant trading? Ah, yes, Kayla said. Apparently, the ghost orchid wars have begun. Several heads turned. Unofficially, of course, Kayla added. But when rare Earth specimens started fetching higher prices than minor asteroid claims, we figured it was time to regulate. The High Counselor's tendrils twitched ominously. Regulate. Kayla tapped again. A logo appeared, Galactic Botanical Exchange. Earth proposes a plant-based cultural diplomacy program, cooperative care agreements, cross-species propagation rights, emotional conflict resolution via floral symbolism. And yes, we've developed secure GrowPod technology. This is absurd, muttered one delegate. Weaponizing houseplants. We prefer to call it peaceful photosynthesis proliferation, Kayla said. But why? Asked the Arthari again, half exasperated, half intrigued. Why plants? Kayla picked up the succulent and held it at eye level. Because no one wants to declare war while nurturing something fragile. Because across all species, the instinct to protect the small and green is universal. Because diplomacy can't just be strategy, it has to be living. A long pause. Then, slowly, the Vayari ambassador raised their hand. I move that all future negotiations be held in terrariums. A ripple of agreement swept through the chamber. The High Counselor leaned back and stared at the planter as though it personally insulted galactic precedent. Kayla placed the succulent on the central pedestal. Phase 4, she murmured to herself with satisfaction, complete. The High Counselor's office had never smelled like cinnamon before. That fact alone would have triggered at least 3 internal investigations had the galactic bureaucracy not already been overwhelmed trying to explain the sudden diplomatic surge in craft-related activity. Ambassador Kayla Lynn, as always, was at the center of it. She stood now beneath the crystalline dome of the Assembly's Cultural Affairs Chamber. Behind her floated holographic projections of macrame wall art, alien crochet circles, and what appeared to be a zero-gravity quilting bee involving beings with no known hands. This, she announced, is what happens when you let humanity get bored in space. The murmuring rose, part confusion, part grudging awe. The celery delegate was visibly knitting. A Praxery envoy wore a newly embroidered sash featuring stylized earth flowers. Even the Arthari ambassador, a lifelong opponent of what he'd once called useless textile entanglement, had a suspiciously hand-loomed satchel on his shoulder. Kayla gestured to the growing collage behind her. It started innocently. A few humans trading embroidery techniques with Volari sensory weavers, a clay workshop on Luna Station, an informal diplomatic crafting retreat titled Glue, Glitter, and Galactic Unity. She paused for effect. Then the Volari discovered scrapbooking. Several crystalline entities twitched audibly. The resulting emotional archive of their interstellar journey was deemed so moving, Kayla continued, that it's now a mandatory empathy training exhibit on 4 assembly stations. One copy even made it into the High Counselor's personal library. The High Counselor coughed and averted his gaze. "And what exactly," asked Counselor Urith with narrowed eyes, "does any of this achieve?" Kayla's expression softened, but her tone sharpened. "It achieves connection." She paced slowly across the floor. "Crafts are a shared language. They don't require translation protocols or political agendas. They require patience, vulnerability, curiosity. In a galaxy of fractal mathematics and thousand-year grudges, we gave you papier-mâché, and you gave it meaning." The screen behind her shifted again. Images from across the galaxy, gelatinous species shaping sculptures using memory-infused resin, crystal-bonded artisans designing iridescent beadwork that encoded ancestral migration patterns. A celery craft-off live stream attracting record viewership as contestants attempted to knit under atmospheric inversion. A diplomatic crochet chain between 8 species, each loop carrying a color code representing shared treaties. "This is not chaos," Kayla said. "It's cultural containment breach by invitation." Counselor Urith frowned. "You're suggesting humans introduced crafting as a form of interstellar policy control?" "Not control," Kayla replied. "Stability and joy." There was a pause. Then the Veari ambassador raised a hand. "Our textile students would like to formally challenge the celery to a cultural embroidery duel. The prize shall be influence over next cycle's visual diplomacy protocols." Kayla grinned. And so it begins. The High Counselor's tendrils had turned a faint, pulsing lavender, the recognized shade of quiet existential defeat. Kayla returned to her seat, noting that at least 3 ambassadors had begun stitching mid-session. Craft kits were already being distributed. The containment had failed. The chaos had spread. And in the distance, somewhere in the upper sectors, a new whisper began circling the digital feeds. "Cottagecore is coming." By now, the galaxy had accepted 3 undeniable truths. Humans were back. They were weird. They were winning 1 loaf of sourdough at a time. The Cultural Containment Chamber, now unofficially renamed the Kayla Lynn Auditorium for Cultural Shenanigans, was packed to capacity. Extra seating hovered midair. The celery delegation had brought snacks. A gelatinous ambassador arrived wearing what could only be described as a crocheted hoodie. And on center stage stood Kayla Lynn, confidently projecting the latest terrasol phenomenon across the chamber. The screen lit up with the words, "Live now, Galactic Baking Showdown, Final Round, Interstellar Sourdough." An audible groan rippled through the assembly. "Ambassador Lynn," the High Counselor began, his voice a blend of exasperation and spiritual surrender, "please explain what you've done this time." Kayla turned, smiling like someone who had both read the script and rewritten the ending. "Soft power," she said. "That's what I've done." The screen shifted again. Images of alien species in home kitchens and orbital bunkers staring intently into ovens, counting down fermentations. A celery warlord lovingly scored a loaf with the symbol of peaceful treaty. A Veari monk was shown crying over a perfectly risen crust. The Earth Streaming Initiative, Kayla explained, was designed to reduce interstellar anxiety and encourage communal experiences through low-stakes chaos. "You launched a planetary-wide baking competition," the Veari delegate said, sounding half accusatory, half hungry. Not just baking, Kayla corrected. Craft streams, language tutorials, meditation rituals. There's even a channel dedicated to watching pterosaur birds with sarcastic commentary from a retired pirate. The hologram zoomed in on a glittering screen, a void-born collective reacting to a cinnamon roll tutorial in real time, their ethereal glow pulsing in rhythm with the rising dough. And you monetized this, the Arthari ambassador asked flatly. Oh, no, Kayla said with a wink. We open-sourced it. We gifted it. Because the moment people from 87 species all tuned in to argue about proofing temperatures, they stopped plotting against each other. A pause. Except on the forums, she added. The forums are a nightmare. Behind her, a live feed showed an alien audience reacting emotionally to a baking mishap, a loaf collapsing as a dramatic pterosaur musical swell played. The comments lit up in dozens of languages, all translating to some variation of, "We believe in you, Squish Chef." Counselor Urith rubbed his forehead. This is diplomacy. It's para-diplomacy, Kayla replied. The subtle act of turning attention, bonding strangers, and de-escalating conflict with shared absurdity. And sourdough, especially sourdough, a crystalline delegate stood slowly. Our youngest subnode just created a whole new pattern of molecular synthesis based on pterosaur braided bread. It is satisfying. Kayla nodded solemnly. That's Hala. The High Counselor's tentacles had settled into what Kayla now recognized as grim admiration. This is a containment breach, he muttered. Kayla smiled wider. No, High Counselor. This is a live stream. And with that, she motioned to the final segment of her presentation. A montage of alien civilians, politicians, mechanics, priests, warriors, all baking, all sharing, all learning Earth's oldest soft power trick. Comfort is contagious. The first sign of trouble was a spike in demand for handmade furniture blueprints. The second was when an entire delegation from the Crystalline Accord arrived at the Celestial Assembly wearing hand-stitched cloaks, embroidered with wildflowers and diplomatic puns. The third, undeniably the point of no return, was when the Celery Ambassador submitted a formal motion written on parchment made from ethically grown mushroom fiber and scented with herbal infusions. The chamber had barely adjusted to sourdough, memes, and diplomatic crafts. It was not ready for cottagecore. Ambassador Kayla Lynn stood once more at the center of the Assembly's grand dome, flanked by potted plants, soft lighting, and a holographic projection of a pterosaur countryside farmhouse. Wind rustled digital trees. A flock of projected chickens wandered serenely across the marble floor. She didn't speak at first. She poured tea. That's when the murmuring began. Cautious, curious, unsettled. Ambassador Lynn, the High Counselor finally asked, voice heavy with cosmic weariness, what is the meaning of this rustic hallucination? Kayla passed him a small jar. Strawberry jam, she said gently, made from actual strawberries, grown on Luna Station, preserved with kindness. The jar clinked against the podium like a threat made of sunshine. Kayla turned to the chamber. Cottagecore, she began, is the romanticization of slow living, the embrace of tradition, comfort, and artisanal aesthetics. It is also statistically one of the most effective antidotes to technocratic burnout. She paused, and in the last 6 cycles, it has sparked a diplomatic revolution. The screen behind her flickered. The void-born drift, long known for their synthetic ecosystems, had converted their upper spires into gravity-neutral herb gardens. The Silicon Collective hosted a galactic potluck where interspecies recipes were served in hand-thrown pottery. The Vayari, notorious for bureaucratic austerity, now issued memos printed in calligraphy on recycled seed paper. And what does this achieve? Asked Counselor Urith, skeptical but clearly crocheting under the table. It achieves restraint, Kayla answered, "You don't build weapons when you're weaving rugs. You don't declare war while writing poetry. You don't conquer planets while baking fig tarts in your refurbished asteroid cottage." A soft chime echoed through the chamber. "Also," Kayla added, "our tracking systems indicate a 72% drop in galactic skirmishes in regions participating in the Cottage Core Accord." The Volari delegates stood. "We used to fear Earth. Now we're debating whether to build a stone oven on our moonside embassy." Another delegate added, "We've discovered hammocks. They are unacceptable and yet perfect." The celery ambassador wiped an emotional eye stalk. "We are making jam." The High Counselor stared down at the jar in front of him. "This," he said slowly, "is not what interstellar politics was meant to be." Kayla raised her teacup. "No," she said softly. "It's better." The chamber was silent. The stars beyond the glass ceiling twinkled gently. Somewhere in the distance, the projected chickens clucked, and the galaxy, already halfway wrapped in patchwork quilts, surrendered completely to soft power anarchy. The final day of the Celestial Assembly's summit began with an embroidery exhibition. It was not by most galactic standards how revolutions started, but that was before Earth redefined galactic diplomacy as chaos stitched together with yarn, jam, and passive-aggressive cat memes. Ambassador Kayla Lynn stood beneath the starlit dome, now permanently transformed by soft lighting, creeping vines, and the scent of freshly baked banana bread. Alien delegates bustled about with tea mugs and handcrafted lanyards. A holographic display hovered quietly above, Cultural Diplomacy Showcase, Day 90. The High Counselor looked like he hadn't slept in 4 rotations. "Ambassador Lynn," he said with the voice of someone who had tried and failed to outpace Terrasol's soft power for too long, "we must now address the matter of sanctions." Kayla, serene in a hand-woven shawl patterned with earth florals and subversive legal citations, nodded. "Of course." She tapped her data pad. The screen behind her blinked to life, not with charts or treaties, but with footage, clips from across the galaxy, crystalline beings guiding children through a DIY starlight lamp workshop, a celery warrior gently sculpting a moss terrarium for their battle meditation alcove, the Voidborn hosting a live-streamed interspecies dungeons and diplomacy game, where a gelatinous ambassador critiqued economic policy in full character voice. "You can sanction trade," Kayla said, voice calm, "but you can't sanction enthusiasm." She stepped forward. "You can embargo routes. You can restrict tech. You can even ban sourdough exports, though I dare you to face the wrath of the Galactic Baking Union." A few nervous laughs. Someone clutched a rolling pin protectively. "But how," Kayla continued, "do you regulate knitting circles? How do you tax cultural exchange that happens in blanket forts? What tariff applies to the shared joy of watching a group of celery teenagers go viral for inventing glow-in-the-dark embroidery that changes color with emotional tone?" The room shifted. Delegates leaned in. "You can't embargo belonging, not once it's taken root." Behind her, the footage faded into a single image, a sprawling star map. But instead of trade routes or political territories, it showed threads, glowing lines of cultural interaction, streams, shared projects, collaborative art, a web of empathy. Kayla let the silence stretch. Then, softly, "You asked if Earth was a threat. But you were never afraid of our weapons. You were afraid of our influence." She turned. "Well, now it's here. And it's not carried by fleets or flags. It's carried by stories, recipes, unironically floral stationery. And this," she held up a humble crocheted square, stitched with the words, "Please don't declare war. I just watered the plants," "is how we win." The High Counselor stared at her, then sighed and laughed. It started as a tired chuckle, but quickly spread. The gelatinous ambassador jiggled in amusement. The Vayari delegate wept openly into a linen handkerchief they'd embroidered with "Peace is patchwork." Even the Art Hari ambassador, once the loudest critic, simply nodded and murmured, "I've started weaving. It's coming." Kayla sat. No thunderous applause. No dramatic declarations. Just a slow, steady realization. The galaxy had changed, not by force, not through conquest, but through the quiet, relentless power of human absurdity, emotional sabotage, and interstellar hospitality. The galaxy wouldn't go back. There were too many sourdough starters now. Too many poems exchanged in spice-scented paper. Too many deep space diplomats who knew how to crochet under fire. And in the heart of it all, Earth's seat, once empty, now impossibly full. Kayla Lynn smiled. She had a cultural exchange to organize and a chicken-themed embroidery guild waiting on deck.